You ever get that feeling like something's shifting, but you can't quite put your finger on what it is? That's where I was a few months ago, when Lisa, my wife, first suggested we start going to the gym together. It seemed like a typical midlife thing. We were both in our mid-30s, had let ourselves go a bit after 2 kids, and spent more evenings with Netflix and takeout than we should have. Lisa brought it up one night after dinner, poking at her stomach and giving me that playful look she always had. "We need to do something about this," she said, patting her side and raising an eyebrow at me. "Both of us." I laughed, thinking it was no big deal. Sure, I had gained a few pounds, and yeah, she was right that we weren't as active as we used to be. But I didn't think much of it. We'd been through enough life changes already. Moving to a new city, juggling work and family, and everything that comes with a long marriage. I figured we'd hit the gym a few times, do a little cardio, maybe some light weights, and call it good. But Lisa took it more seriously than I expected. We signed up for a gym membership together, and I won't lie, at first it was kind of fun. We pushed each other, shared some laughs while struggling through beginner workouts, and even went out for smoothies afterward. There was this renewed energy between us, something that had been missing for a while. I loved seeing her excited about something again, and honestly, it felt good to do it together. She started shedding weight faster than me, but that was okay. I was just happy to see her smile again. The first few months were great. We were both feeling more fit, more alive. But then the shift began. At first, it was subtle. Lisa started spending more time on her appearance before heading to the gym. New workout clothes, more makeup than usual. I didn't think much of it. After all, she was getting in shape and probably feeling good about herself. But still, there was this strange tension building, something I couldn't quite name. The gym wasn't just about us anymore. Lisa started making friends there, guys and girls. I didn't mind. Not at first. It was a social place, after all, and people tend to bond over shared struggles. But I couldn't ignore the way some of the guys looked at her. She had this confidence now, this glow, and it didn't go unnoticed. One guy in particular stood out. Jake, her personal trainer. I met him once when I tagged along to one of her sessions. He was the kind of guy you'd expect in a gym. Tall, muscular, overly friendly. Too friendly if you ask me. He seemed nice enough, but there was something about the way he interacted with Lisa that rubbed me the wrong way. The way his hand would linger on her back when guiding her through a workout. The way he'd joke with her, making her laugh a little too hard. But I pushed it out of my mind. Lisa was loyal. We'd been through too much together for something like that to worry me. Still, a few things started to nag at me. One day, after he got home from the gym, Lisa got a text. Her phone was face down on the counter, and when it buzzed, she grabbed it quickly, almost like she didn't want me to see. I asked her who it was, casually, not really expecting much. "Oh, it's just Jake," she said, her tone too light, too dismissive. "He's sending me some tips for my form." That was the first time I felt a small spark of doubt. Why was her trainer texting her outside of work hours? And why did she seem so secretive about it? But I brushed it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. Trainers send advice to their clients, right? I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. As the weeks went by, Lisa started going to the gym more often without me. I'd be stuck at work, and she'd head out in the evenings for her workouts. At first, it didn't bother me. I was glad she was so dedicated, but then I started noticing little changes in her behavior. She became distant, always on her phone, texting late at night. When I asked her about it, she'd say it was nothing, just chatting with some gym friends. But something didn't sit right with me. One night, I decided to stay up later than usual, pretending to be asleep next to her while she quietly tapped away on her phone. I peeked over and saw her smiling down at the screen, quickly typing something back. My stomach churned. There it was again, Jake's name at the top of the message thread. I felt a rush of something dark and heavy creep into my chest, but I said nothing. Over the next few weeks, I became more aware of the subtle shifts in our routine. She'd leave earlier for the gym, stay later, and when I'd ask how her session went, she'd give me vague answers like, it was fine, just the usual. Gone were the excited updates, the shared enthusiasm we once had. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The doubts kept building. My work schedule shifted, and I couldn't go to the gym with her as often. That's when I started paying more attention. I noticed how she'd dress up for the gym, more than usual. Hair done perfectly, new leggings, even perfume. Who wears perfume to the gym? I chalked it up to her feeling good about herself. But deep down, I felt that pit in my stomach growing larger every day. Then, one Saturday, she told me she had a gym event. I didn't even know that was a thing. Some sort of group workout followed by smoothies with her friends. She left in a hurry, barely giving me a kiss on the way out the door. I couldn't take it anymore. That evening, I made the decision to follow her. Following your own wife. That's something you never imagined doing. But there I was, sitting in my car a few blocks away from the gym, heart racing and palms sweaty, waiting to see what Lisa was really up to. It wasn't something I did lightly. I hated myself for it, but the feeling that something was off had been gnawing at me for too long. I needed to know. Was I just being paranoid? Was this all in my head? Or was there something deeper? Something she wasn't telling me? I parked across the street, careful to stay out of sight, and waited. Lisa had mentioned this gym event, but I didn't buy it. There had been too many vague explanations, too many late nights at the gym without me. And Jake, her personal trainer, was always in the picture, texting her after hours, smiling at her in ways that made my blood boil. I needed answers, and this was the only way I could think of to get them. About 30 minutes later, I spotted her car pulling into the gym parking lot. She stepped out, looking great as usual, too great for just a workout. Tight leggings, a fitted top that showed off the new curves she'd worked so hard for. I watched as she walked confidently into the building, her phone in hand. My heart pounded as I considered following her inside, but I knew that'd be too risky. So I waited, the minutes ticking by slowly. After about an hour, Lisa walked out, but she wasn't alone. Jake was with her. That tall, athletic asshole who always seemed too interested in her. They didn't notice me, parked across the street in the shadows. I watched as they laughed, a little too comfortably, and headed toward his car. My hands tightened around the steering wheel, but I stayed still, watching. There was nothing overtly wrong, no touching, no kissing, but the chemistry was undeniable. I could feel it from where I sat. They drove off, and I followed at a distance. I kept my headlights off and stuck a few cars behind them, trying not to draw attention to myself. My heart raced as I wondered what I'd find. Were they just friends? Was this all innocent? Or was there something more happening between them? Something that was being hidden from me? They pulled into a small cafe nearby. One of those places that's open late, the kind with dim lighting and an intimate atmosphere. I watched as they parked and went inside, sitting at a table near the window. Lisa was smiling, laughing at something Jake said, leaning in closer than she ever did with me lately. I could see it, the way they were with each other, so relaxed, like there were no boundaries between them. For a moment, I considered storming inside, demanding answers. But I held back. I needed proof. I couldn't just go in there, accuse her of something without knowing for sure. So, I stayed in my car, waiting, watching. My mind was spinning, caught between disbelief and anger. Was I really watching my wife flirt with another man? How long had this been going on? I followed her again a few nights later. This time, I parked farther away, taking no chances of being seen. It was becoming a pattern. Lisa would say she was heading to the gym, meet Jake for a workout, and then they'd go out for food or drinks afterward. They weren't doing anything explicitly wrong. No kissing, no overt signs of an affair, but the emotional connection was obvious. I knew it in my gut, and each time, it ate away at me a little more. One night, after another one of her late workouts, Lisa came home smelling faintly of cologne. It wasn't mine. She acted like everything was normal, heading straight for the shower without so much as a second glance at me. As she disappeared into the bathroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, my thoughts racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, that whatever was happening with Jake had already crossed a line. But still, I had no hard proof. Just these moments, these glimpses of something that felt wrong. I needed to dig deeper. That's when I decided to take things a step further. I started checking her phone again, but this time I was more thorough. I waited for moments when she wasn't around, scrolling through her texts and social media. She was careful, though, too careful. There were no texts from Jake, nothing in her messages that seemed off. It was almost like she knew I might look. But why would she be so cautious if there was nothing to hide? I began to check her phone's location when she wasn't looking, tracking her movements through an app we had installed to keep tabs on each other for safety. Most of the time, she was where she said she'd be, the gym, work, running errands. But one night, when she said she was at the gym, I saw her location pop up in a part of town she had no reason to be in. It was a quiet residential area, nowhere near the gym. That night, she came home late again, her excuses becoming more and more flimsy. I couldn't confront her yet, though, not without something concrete. So I kept following her. I started taking notes, dates, times, locations, anything that seemed off. Every time she said she was with friends, I'd track her phone or follow her to see if it was true. Sometimes she was exactly where she said she'd be, but more often than not, she'd end up somewhere else. With Jake, the sneaking around was driving me crazy. I barely slept, my mind racing every night as I wondered where she really was and what she was doing. I felt like I was losing my grip, torn between wanting to confront her and wanting to know the whole truth. And then one night, everything changed. That night is burned into my memory. It was a Wednesday, and Lisa had told me she'd be working out late again, the usual excuse. This time, though, something felt different. There was a tension in her voice, a subtle edge that made me feel like she was nervous. I watched her as she got ready, meticulously putting on makeup, choosing a new workout outfit that hugged her body in all the right places. "Why so dressed up for the gym?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my heart was pounding in my chest. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I just want to look good, you know? Feel good while I work out." I didn't push it. I just nodded, watching her grab her bag and head out the door. As soon as she was gone, I grabbed my keys, ready to follow her again. I've been doing it for weeks now, but tonight felt different. I had this sinking feeling in my gut, like something was about to happen. I trailed her car from a distance, careful to stay far enough behind that she wouldn't notice me. She drove the usual route toward the gym, but halfway there, she made an unexpected turn, heading into a part of town I hadn't seen her go to before. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as I followed her into a quiet, residential neighborhood. The streets were dark, lined with trees and large houses that looked like they belonged to people who kept secrets. I watched as Lisa parked in front of a house, Jake's house. She stepped out of the car, glancing around quickly before walking up to the front door. My stomach twisted into a knot. This wasn't just a friendly visit. Something was going on. I parked a few houses down, heart hammering in my chest, and watched as the door opened, Jake standing there with that easy, confident smile. He welcomed her inside without hesitation. For a moment, I sat frozen in my car, unsure of what to do. My mind was racing with every worst-case scenario. Were they just hanging out? Was I blowing this out of proportion? Or had it already crossed the line I feared it had? I had to know, but I couldn't just walk up to the door and knock. Not yet. I needed to see for myself what was happening behind closed doors. That's when I remembered the camera app on my phone. Weeks ago, in a moment of desperation, I'd installed a small GPS tracker in her car and set up a hidden camera in our house, one I could access remotely. I'd been using it to check when she'd come and go, but now it could serve a different purpose. I activated the camera, hoping to catch something that might give me a clue. But after a few minutes of watching nothing but an empty front room through the app, I realized I had to get closer. I stepped out of the car, nerves on edge, and walked as quietly as I could toward Jake's house. His living room windows were open, curtains drawn just enough that I could see faint movements inside. I found a spot behind a large tree in his front yard, hidden enough that I could see what was going on, but wouldn't be seen. My heart was in my throat as I strained to catch a glimpse through the window. What I saw made my blood run cold. There they were, sitting close together on Jake's couch, wine glasses in hand, laughing softly. Lisa looked more relaxed than I'd seen her in weeks. Her body language was easy, familiar, the kind of comfort that didn't belong between a wife and her trainer. Jake leaned in closer, whispering something in her ear, and she smiled, a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. A smile she used to give me. I felt like the world was spinning around me, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I watched as his hand slowly slid over her thigh, lingering there. She didn't pull away. She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My heart shattered piece by piece, but I kept watching. Then it happened. Jake reached up, brushing her hair aside, and kissed her neck. Soft, slow, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Lisa closed her eyes, exhaling softly, her body melting into his. That's when I knew. There was no mistaking it now. This wasn't innocent. This wasn't just flirting or some close friendship. This was an affair, and it had been happening right under my nose for who knows how long. The anger surged through me like fire. But I stayed rooted to the spot, watching as their hands began to roam, as the distance between them disappeared. They weren't holding back anymore. The tension that had been building for weeks was gone, replaced by something raw, something physical. They were lost in each other, oblivious to everything else. I wanted to break through the window, to tear them apart, to scream at Lisa for what she was doing to us, to our family. But I didn't. I stayed hidden, my breath shallow, my hands shaking. This was the proof I needed, but it came with a cost. It broke something in me, something that I knew would never heal. They moved from the couch to the bedroom, the door shutting softly behind them. I didn't need to see what happened next. I already knew. I stumbled back to my car, my mind numb, my body trembling. The rage, the betrayal, the hurt, it all hit me at once like a tidal wave. I sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel, wondering how I'd ended up here. How had we gotten to this point? How had I lost her to someone like Jake? But then, through the fog of pain, a new feeling began to rise: revenge. I wasn't just going to sit back and let this happen. No, if Lisa thought she could do this to me, she had another thing coming. I was going to make sure they both paid for what they'd done. And I had just the plan to make it happen. When I drove away that night, my mind was buzzing with a dangerous mix of rage and heartbreak. The image of Lisa and Jake together, touching, kissing, our bed waiting for them in the next room, it was all I could think about. The anger coursing through me was like nothing I had ever felt before. I didn't just want to confront her. I wanted to humiliate them both. I wanted them to feel the same pain and shame I was drowning in. By the time I got home, the plan had started to form in my mind. I wasn't going to shout or cry or beg for answers. No, I was going to hit back in a way that would destroy them, just like they were destroying me. I wasn't just going to confront Lisa about the affair. I was going to expose it to everyone. There'd be no more hiding, no more sneaking around, no more secrets. I wanted them to feel the humiliation I felt, publicly and painfully. The first thing I did was go back to my hidden cameras. I'd been using them to monitor Lisa's late-night comings and goings, but now they would serve a much bigger purpose. Before she came home that night, I carefully installed more cameras around the house, small, nearly invisible ones strategically placed in the living room, the kitchen, and especially in our bedroom. I was going to catch them in the act. The next few days were a blur of quiet planning. I didn't let on that I knew anything. I didn't confront Lisa. I acted like everything was normal, though it killed me inside every time I saw her. She would smile at me, kiss me on the cheek, and make small talk about her day as if nothing had changed. But I could see through her now. I could see the lies behind her eyes. Every night, she went out to the gym, and every night, I tracked her to Jake's house, watching them repeat the same routine. A quick drink, some flirty conversation, and then, inevitably, the bedroom. It was like they thought they could get away with it forever, that I was oblivious or didn't care. But each time I watched them together, I felt less like the victim and more like the one holding the cards. They didn't know what was coming. And then it happened. My cameras finally caught what I'd been waiting for. One night, after a particularly long gym session, Lisa brought Jake back to our house. It was a Thursday, and I had conveniently made plans to be out of town for a work meeting that night. At least, that's what I'd told her. In reality, I was just a few blocks away, parked and waiting. I had already set up everything at home. Cameras in every corner of the house, recording every move they made. I watched from my phone as Lisa led Jake inside, laughing quietly as if she didn't have a care in the world. They sat in the living room for a while, drinking wine, flirting, just like they did at his place. The way she looked at him, so relaxed, so carefree. It was like she wasn't the same woman who had vowed to love me for the rest of her life. That woman was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. They moved to the kitchen, still laughing, still touching each other in those subtle, intimate ways that used to be reserved for us. It wasn't long before they found their way upstairs. I watched in sickening silence as they stripped off their clothes, collapsing into the bed I shared with Lisa for years. My blood boiled as they kissed, touched, and finally had sex, right there in my bed in our home. But this time, they weren't just betraying me. They were giving me everything I needed to ruin them. Once they were done, I stopped the recording and saved it to a hidden file. I sat there for a long time, staring at the footage, feeling both devastated and oddly empowered. It was painful beyond belief to watch my wife in the arms of another man, but at the same time, I knew this was the key to taking them down. They didn't know it yet, but their world was about to come crashing down. The next step in my plan was the hardest, waiting. I had to bide my time, make sure everything was perfectly set up. The gym was going to be the perfect stage for their downfall. Lisa and Jake spent so much time there, acting like they were untouchable, like no one knew. Well, I was going to make sure everyone knew. I contacted Matt, the security guard at the gym. He was an old friend, a solid guy who had gone through something similar in his marriage. His wife had cheated on him, leaving him broken and bitter, but stronger for it. When I told him about what was happening, he didn't hesitate to offer his help. There was a certain grim satisfaction in his voice when he agreed to my plan. "They deserve it," he said simply. "After what you've been through, man, I'm in. No one should have to go through that." We set the plan in motion. The gym had large TV screens scattered throughout, usually playing workout videos, promotions, and music videos. Matt had access to the system and could easily override the feed to play whatever we wanted. All I needed was the right moment, and I was patient. The day came quicker than I expected. A Saturday afternoon, the gym bustling with people, and of course, Lisa and Jake in the middle of their session, unaware that I was just outside, ready to strike. I've been waiting for this, for the perfect moment when the gym was packed, when Lisa and Jake would be surrounded by people who knew them, people who had no idea what they were really doing behind closed doors. I waited until I saw them. They were working out, laughing, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. I gave Matt the signal, and within seconds, the gym screens flickered. The regular programming vanished, replaced by the video I had recorded. The video of them, naked in bed in our home. It started playing on every screen in the gym. It all unfolded in slow motion. I stood just outside the gym doors, peering in through the glass, watching the chaos erupt. One moment, the usual workout playlists and motivational videos were playing on the screens scattered throughout the gym, and the next, the footage I'd taken of Lisa and Jake in bed began playing. There was no mistaking what was happening on those screens. The unmistakable moans, the way they touched each other. It was raw, undeniable. At first, no one noticed. People were absorbed in their workouts, headphones on, minding their own business. But then someone stopped running on the treadmill. Then another person, and another. Whispers began spreading across the gym like wildfire. I started to lock onto the screens. The room slowly filled with stunned silence, interrupted only by the rhythmic sound of Lisa and Jake's betrayal playing for everyone to see. It wasn't until someone let out an audible gasp that Lisa looked up from her workout, sweat dripping down her face, her body still in the middle of a set of squats. She stood frozen, staring up at the screen in horror, realizing, far too late, what everyone else had already figured out. Her face went pale. I could see the shock hit her like a truck, her mouth opening slightly in disbelief, as if her brain couldn't process what was happening fast enough. Jake, on the other hand, reacted quickly. He darted forward, reaching for the nearest screen, trying to turn it off or cover it up, but there was nothing he could do. The footage was everywhere. Every screen in the gym, every corner, every person was watching them, naked and tangled in each other's arms. The whispers grew louder, turning into murmurs, then full-blown exclamations. People were pulling out their phones, recording the scandal in real time. I could see gym members talking, pointing, trying to figure out how something so personal, so damning was playing in front of everyone. And Lisa? She just stood there trembling. Her hand flew to her mouth as she stared up at the footage, as if hoping it wasn't real. But it was. The entire gym was watching her commit the ultimate betrayal, and there was nowhere for her to hide. For a moment, I felt a rush of satisfaction. This was it. This was the moment I had planned for. She was exposed, humiliated, just like I had been. I had given her what she deserved. Public shame for the private pain she had caused me. Jake was shouting now, yelling at the staff to shut off the feed, but it was too late. The damage was done. Even if they turned the screens off, people had already seen it. Phones had recorded it. It was already out there. I watched as he grabbed Lisa's arm, pulling her toward the exit, trying to get them both out before the situation got worse. But there was no escaping it. Lisa looked like she was about to cry, her eyes darting around the gym as people stared at her, whispering behind their hands, some even laughing. I could only imagine what was going through her head in that moment. The life she'd built, the perfect image she had maintained for so long, it was crumbling around her. She was breaking, and for a split second, I felt a pang of something. Guilt? Regret? Maybe. But it was fleeting, snuffed out by the memory of her betrayal. She had brought this on herself. I slipped out of sight before they made it to the exit. I didn't want to face them. Not yet. I wasn't done. This was just the beginning. Lisa thought she could cheat on me, lie to me, sneak around with her trainer without consequences? No. She hadn't even begun to understand what betrayal felt like. After the chaos of the gym, I went home, my mind still buzzing from the aftermath. I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head. Lisa's face when she realized everyone was watching. Jake's panicked attempts to cover the screens. The way the entire gym seemed to turn against them in an instant. It felt good, in a twisted way, to have taken control, to have flipped the script on them. But when Lisa came home that night, she was a wreck. Her eyes were red, her face streaked with tears, and her hands were shaking. She looked broken, like a shell of the woman who had walked out of the house earlier that day. The confident, self-assured Lisa was gone, replaced by someone desperate, someone terrified of what came next. She barely made it through the door before collapsing onto the couch, sobbing. I stood in the hallway, watching her fall apart. "You," she choked out between sobs. "You did this." I didn't say anything at first. I just watched her, letting her words hang in the air. She was looking for an apology, or maybe an explanation, but I wasn't going to give her either. "You had sex with him in our bed, Lisa," I said quietly, my voice cold measured. "What did you think would happen?" She sobbed harder, trying to speak, but the words came out in a jumbled mess. She was gasping, her body shaking as she tried to gather herself. But there was no sympathy left in me. Not after everything she'd done. I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she managed to say, her voice trembling. I stepped closer, my anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "You didn't mean for it to happen like this? Lisa, you've been lying to me for months. You've been sneaking around, fucking him behind my back, and now you want to tell me it's not what it looks like?" She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving. I didn't want to hurt you. Too late for that. I shot back, my voice sharper now. "You destroyed everything." She didn't respond. She just sat there, crying, as if her tears could somehow erase the mess she'd made. But I wasn't going to let her off the hook that easily. I wasn't going to let her pretend that this was something we could just move past. "You're done here," I said after a long pause, my voice hard. "I want you out of this house by tomorrow." Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. "What?" "You heard me. I'm filing for divorce, Lisa. This marriage is over." For a moment, she looked like she was going to protest, like she was going to beg for forgiveness. But the words never came. She knew it was over. There was nothing left to say. Lisa didn't move for a long time after I told her I wanted her out of the house. She sat there, shaking, her face pale and tear-streaked, as if she was trying to process what had just happened. The silence in the room was deafening. All I could hear was her shallow, broken breathing as she wiped her face with trembling hands. I expected her to argue, to fight back, to beg me to stay, but she didn't. She just sat there, defeated, like she already knew this was the end. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. I waited, half expecting her to try and reason with me, to say something that might make me rethink my decision. But I was done waiting for explanations, for apologies that wouldn't mean anything. Lisa had made her choices, and now I was making mine. "You can't be serious," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm completely serious, I replied, my voice firm. This is over, Lisa. You need to leave. Her face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't have anywhere to go. I stared at her, feeling the coldness inside me grow. For a moment, I felt a twinge of pity. After all, this was the woman I had loved for years, the woman I had built a life with. But that pity was quickly drowned by the image of her with Jake. The betrayal, the lies. I wasn't going to let her stay here, in our house, pretending like there was anything left to salvage. That's not my problem, I said, crossing my arms. You should have thought about that before you started fucking your trainer. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She winced, her breath hitching as she tried to speak. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just got out of control. I scoffed. Out of control? Lisa, you had a choice. Every single time you texted him, every time you snuck out of this house to meet him, you made a choice. And now you have to deal with the consequences. She shook her head, as if trying to deny it, but the truth was too heavy to escape. She knew I was right. There was no talking her way out of this one. I didn't mean to fall for him, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt something in me snap at that. Fall for him? Was she seriously standing here, telling me she had feelings for this guy? It wasn't just sex. It wasn't just a fling. It was worse than that. She had fallen for him. After everything we had been through, after the life we built together, she'd chosen him. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice low and filled with contempt. Do you even realize what you're saying? You destroyed everything for him. Lisa's face twisted in pain, but I didn't care. I didn't want to hear any more of her excuses. I don't want to talk about this anymore. You need to pack your things and leave. I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow. She didn't move at first. Her eyes were wide, pleading with me to take it back, to reconsider. But I wasn't budging. Not this time. She slowly stood, her legs shaky, and walked toward the stairs, her head hung low. I watched her disappear up to our bedroom. Her bedroom now, I realized. It wasn't mine anymore. Nothing about this house felt like mine anymore. I sat down heavily on the couch, staring blankly ahead, my mind swirling with emotions I couldn't pin down. Anger, grief, relief. It all mixed together in a chaotic storm that left me feeling exhausted. I should have felt victorious. I had executed my plan, exposed her, humiliated her. I had the upper hand. So why did I feel so empty? The next day, Lisa left. She didn't put up a fight. I watched as she packed a few suitcases, moving through the house like a ghost. She barely looked at me as she carried her things down the stairs and loaded them into her car. There were no words left between us. As she pulled out of the driveway, I realized I didn't even know where she was going. Maybe to Jake's place, maybe to a friend's. It didn't matter. She was gone. The house was eerily quiet after she left. I walked through the empty rooms, each one feeling colder, lonelier, without her presence. The silence pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I had thought that once she was gone, I would feel free, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. But instead, I felt hollow, like I had lost something I wasn't ready to lose, even after everything that had happened. I knew I had made the right decision. Lisa had broken our marriage beyond repair, and I couldn't live with her betrayal. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. I wasn't just mourning the end of our relationship. I was mourning the life we had built together, the memories we had shared, the future we had planned. And now it was all gone. In the days that followed, I filed for divorce. I didn't drag it out or make it messy. I wanted it done and over with as quickly as possible. I hired a lawyer, had the paperwork drawn up, and sent it to Lisa. She didn't contest anything. She signed the papers without hesitation, probably too ashamed to fight for anything. Maybe she knew she didn't have the right. As the divorce moved forward, I tried to distract myself. I threw myself into work, avoiding the house as much as I could. The place felt haunted, full of memories I didn't want to face. The bed was empty, the kitchen quiet, and the routine we had shared was gone. I was alone, really alone, for the first time in years. My friends told me I should go out, meet new people, get my mind off Lisa. But I couldn't. Not yet. The wound was still too fresh, too raw. Everywhere I went, I was reminded of her. I couldn't escape it. The constant thoughts of what she had done, of the lies, of the nights she had spent with Jake instead of with me. It ate away at me, day by day, until I wasn't sure if I was angry anymore or just numb. Jake and Lisa had stayed together, as far as I knew. It didn't surprise me. They had already destroyed one life together. Why not try to build something new out of the ashes? I didn't care anymore. Let them have each other. They were both equally broken. But there was one last thing I needed to do. One final act of closure. The divorce had been finalized within weeks, faster than I expected. It was as if Lisa wanted to close the chapter as quickly as possible, probably to avoid the humiliation lingering around her. I didn't hear much from her after that. The silence was welcome, but also strange. After years of marriage, it was eerie how someone who had been such a huge part of my life could just vanish. But there was still something unresolved within me. Even though the divorce papers were signed and Lisa was gone from my life, I couldn't shake the weight of it all. I wasn't just mourning the loss of my marriage. I was angry, furious. I had exposed Lisa and Jake, humiliated them in front of everyone, but somehow I still felt like there was a part of me chained to the past, still haunted by what had happened. I needed real closure. The thought had been simmering in my mind for days, growing slowly, until it became something I couldn't ignore. I knew where Jake worked. I knew where he trained his clients. He was still at the same gym, parading around like nothing had happened. I'd heard from a few people that he had started showing up less, lying low after the video scandal, but he hadn't left town. He was still there. And so was Lisa. I'd seen her once, from a distance, heading into the gym to meet him. It had been about 2 weeks since everything had blown up, and they were still together. I guess their twisted bond had survived the public humiliation. The sight of her walking into the gym again sent a fresh wave of bitterness through me. I had exposed them, humiliated them, and yet here they were, carrying on as if they were untouchable. It made me realize something. I hadn't really confronted Lisa. Sure, I had kicked her out, filed for divorce, and made her life hell at the gym, but I had never truly faced her, never forced her to explain what she had done. I had walked away too quickly, hoping the revenge and the breakup would give me peace. It hadn't. That's when I decided to pay her a visit. The gym was packed that day like it always was on Saturdays. I hadn't set foot inside since the night I exposed them, but today, I was ready. There was a strange calmness about me as I walked through the automatic doors. It wasn't like before when I'd followed Lisa, hiding in the shadows, trying to catch her in the act. Now I was walking straight into the storm with no intention of backing down. I spotted them immediately. Jake was in the middle of a training session with a client. Lisa sitting on one of the benches nearby, watching him. It was surreal to see her in this setting again, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. For me, at least. I walked straight toward her, not even hesitating. She didn't notice me at first. Her eyes were glued to Jake, who was laughing with his client, completely oblivious to my approach. But when she finally glanced my way and saw me coming, her face froze. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure shock. "Michael," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise of the gym. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, letting the weight of my presence settle in. She looked panicked, like she wasn't sure what I was going to do. Good. She should have been scared. "What are you doing here?" she finally asked, her voice shaky. I looked her dead in the eye, feeling none of the nervousness or hesitation that had once plagued me. "I came to get some closure." Her face crumpled, a mix of fear and guilt flashing across her features. "Michael, please, this isn't the place." "No." I cut her off, my voice low but firm. "This is exactly the place." She blinked, taken aback by my tone. She had never heard me like this before. I had always been the calm one, the reasonable one. Not today. Not anymore. "I want to know," I said, stepping closer to her, "why you did it. Why Why did you throw everything away for that?" I nodded toward Jake, who was still busy with his client, completely unaware of the confrontation happening behind him. Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel sympathy. I didn't care about her tears anymore. I don't know, she began, her voice trembling. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. It just happened. That's bullshit, Lisa, and you know it. I snapped. People don't just happen to cheat. You made a choice. Every time you texted him, every time you went to his house, you made a choice. So tell me, was it worth it? She didn't answer. She just looked away, tears streaming down her face, unable to meet my eyes. Her silence told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't worth it. She had thrown away everything, our marriage, our life, for some meaningless affair. And now, she was paying the price. I stood there for a long moment, watching her crumble. I thought it would feel good, seeing her like this, broken, regretful, ashamed. But instead, I just felt tired, exhausted. I didn't want to carry this anger anymore. I didn't want to be chained to this betrayal for the rest of my life. Without another word, I turned to leave. As I walked out of the gym, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in months, the weight of everything started to lift. I had confronted her, gotten my answers, even if they weren't the ones I had wanted. But it was enough. It was time to let go, to move on. The days after I confronted Lisa were different. It wasn't like I woke up one morning and everything was magically better. The pain was still there, lingering in the background, but it wasn't consuming me like it had before. I had finally let go of the anger, the need for revenge, and that in itself was freeing. But moving on didn't mean the damage wasn't done. The house felt emptier than ever. Lisa was gone, and I was still adjusting to living alone. It was strange. Sometimes I'd find myself expecting to hear her voice when I walked through the door or see her sitting in the kitchen drinking her morning coffee. But, of course, she wasn't there. She wouldn't be coming back. It was hard to let go of the routine we had built together. Even after everything that had happened, there were still moments when I missed her, missed the life we used to have. But that life was a lie, built on the foundation of a marriage that had slowly crumbled long before I even knew it. The hardest part wasn't losing Lisa. It was realizing how much I had lost myself along the way. I spent a lot of time reflecting, looking back on the last few years, trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong. I realized that the affair hadn't been the only problem. Sure, it was the final straw, the thing that shattered everything, but there had been cracks long before Jake ever showed up. Lisa had drifted away from me, and I hadn't even noticed. Maybe I'd been too focused on work, too distracted by the monotony of life to see that our connection was slipping. But what was done was done. There was no point in dwelling on the past anymore. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding myself, my routine, my life. I threw myself into work, picking up extra hours to stay busy. I started going to the gym again, not out of spite, but because I needed something for me. Every drop of sweat, every lift felt like I was shedding the past one piece at a time. It was therapeutic in a way, to take control of my body, to feel like I was doing something for myself again. The nights were the hardest. The silence of the house, once a peaceful escape, now felt like a suffocating reminder of the life I'd lost. I didn't sleep much. I spent most nights staring at the ceiling, wrestling with thoughts that wouldn't quiet down. Thoughts about Lisa, about the betrayal, about what my life was supposed to be. But gradually, the nights got a little easier. I started falling asleep without replaying the past. I started dreaming of the future instead. Friends reached out, offering support, inviting me out to drinks or dinner, trying to pull me back into the world. At first, I turned them down, not ready to face the outside yet. But eventually, I said yes. I went out, had a few drinks, and started to remember what life felt like without the constant weight of the affair pressing down on me. It wasn't easy. Every step forward felt small, like I was trudging through thick mud, but it was progress. I could feel myself slowly coming back to life. I started doing things I hadn't done in years. Picking up hobbies I had let go of, seeing old friends I hadn't talked to in forever. It was like I was rediscovering who I was outside of the marriage, outside of the pain. I wasn't just rebuilding a life, I was rebuilding me. One evening, I was at the gym, finishing up a long workout when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around to see a woman I vaguely recognized from my earlier visits. She smiled at me, a little shy but friendly. "Hey, I've seen you around a lot lately," she said. "You've been really consistent with your workouts." I nodded, wiping the sweat from my forehead. Yeah, just trying to stay on track. She introduced herself, Sarah, I think her name was, and we ended up chatting for a few minutes. It wasn't anything deep or personal, just casual gym talk, but it felt nice. It had been a long time since I'd had a normal conversation with someone, especially a woman who wasn't connected to all the mess of my recent life. After that, I started seeing her more often at the gym. We'd exchange a few words, sometimes a quick smile, but nothing more. I wasn't ready for anything serious, not yet. But the fact that I was even talking to someone, letting myself enjoy simple moments again, was a sign that I was healing. Slowly, I started putting myself out there more. I joined a few work events I'd normally skip, went to some gatherings with friends. There were still moments where I felt the sting of what had happened, but they were fewer and farther between. I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders day by day. One evening, months later, I was sitting on the back porch, staring out at the yard as the sun set. It was peaceful, the kind of quiet I had once hated but now found comforting. My phone buzzed on the table next to me. I glanced at it and saw a message from Lisa. "Can we talk?" It had been months since I'd heard from her. I hadn't even thought about her much lately. The divorce was long behind us, and I had moved on, at least as much as one can after something like that. I stared at the message for a long time, wondering what she could possibly want to talk about. Was she sorry? Did she regret everything? Or was she just looking for closure, like I had been that day in the gym? Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave the past in the past. But another part of me, a quieter, more reflective part, thought maybe I should hear her out. Not for her, but for me. Maybe this was the final piece of the puzzle, the last thing I needed to close the book on that chapter of my life. I picked up the phone and typed a short reply. "Okay, let's talk." Lisa and I met a few days later at a quiet cafe far from the places we used to go together. When I saw her, she looked different. Older, maybe tired. There was a sadness in her eyes that I hadn't seen before, not even when everything had first fallen apart. We sat down, awkward at first, unsure of how to start. She fidgeted with her cup, avoiding my gaze for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I am. I'm so sorry for everything I did to you." I didn't say anything. I just listened. I had heard those words before, but this time they felt different. They felt genuine. "I never meant to hurt you," she continued, her voice shaking. I was lost, and I made terrible choices. I destroyed everything we had, and I regret it every day." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words settle over me. I could see the pain in her eyes, the regret, but I didn't feel the same anger I once had. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I wasn't even looking for an explanation. I had moved on, and I realized in that moment that I had truly let go of the hurt. "I'm sorry too," I said quietly, "for my part in everything. I wasn't perfect, either." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know." We talked for a while longer, about the past, about what went wrong, about where we had both ended up. It was a difficult conversation, but by the end of it, I felt a sense of peace. I had finally closed the door on that chapter of my life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. As we parted ways, I realized that moving on wasn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It was about accepting it, learning from it, and allowing myself to heal. And that's where the story ends. It wasn't the ending I expected when this all started, but it was the one I needed. I learned a lot about myself, about love, and about how fragile trust can be. But I also learned that no matter how deep the betrayal, there's always a way forward. Life goes on, and so do we.